So I'm Vicki Haddox, and I have some of you look familiar to me, so I'm sure I've met some of you. And I will try and do this really quickly because I want to respect that we have two other people that need to go.
Can I just... Hi everybody, my name is Thelma Pierce and I'm the Assistant Director for Related Services. So related services are speech, I'm forgetting, OT, PT, adaptive, I'm sorry? Vision, adaptive phys ed, what am I forgetting? FM, audiology, did I get everything?
I think so.
Okay. With me also is, in addition to Vicki Haddox, is Doris Howell-Samuels. She is the supervisor for PT and OT. I also have another supervisor for speech and language, and she is Aitza Barrero Sanchez. And for audiology, FM is Elise Fertel, who is the audiologist. So I just wanted to say hello so that everybody knew who I was, and I will turn it over to Vicki Haddox.
So we had initially intended to give you lots of information. We're going to kind of condense some of it. As Thelma said, she is the Assistant Director for Related Services. I am a speech and language therapist by training, but I also do assistive technology. You all may be familiar with Sue Dubusky. She's an OT. She has been in the role of assistive technology for quite a while in BPS. And then Jonathan Fine is an OT who also helps us out. Mary Marcella is an SLP who is helping us out, and then Terry Majori is the vision person. The assistive technology for vision is really pretty specific, and she's got a lot of expertise in that. So we do a lot of evaluations during the IEP process. We also do some consultations. We do a lot of training. That's a very important part of having technology in the schools. I wrote a grant for the VISL program, so we've been rolling that out and coordinating that in a number of schools. We're also collaborating with the OIIT, the Office of Instructional and Informational Technology, around other professional development and bringing technology into schools, and the autism strands, particularly around all of the iPads that are in classes. So we do professional development around that too. And then we're collaborating with the Inclusive Schools Network. They are creating access centers through a grant, and we're kind of giving them advice on some of that as well. So the definition of assistive technology, you guys was very helpfully put on the handout. It's a lot of jargon. Sorry about that, but that's just kind of the nature of educational technology sometimes. But the important thing to note is that assistive technology ranges from pieces of paper with picture symbols on it all the way up to other devices, and I'll show you some examples of that later on. Augmentative and alternative communication, which as a speech therapist is kind of my specialty, again, goes from anywhere from picture symbols on a piece of paper. We go through more mid-tech devices that do have some voice output. We have switches, and then we go all the way up to dedicated communication devices, and iPads are in there somewhere too. But this differs a little bit from instructional technology. Assistive technology tends to be focused much more on an individual student and helping that student, accommodating their disability in a way that they can access the curriculum. Instructional technology is what the teacher uses as part of her instruction every day. Can this also be assistive technology? Yes. But in general, instruction technology is just how the teacher increases everyone's access to the curriculum, which kind of falls into universal design for learning. The next slide, this is more of a school-wide or a classroom-wide approach, and it thinks about multiple ways to engage your students. So you're talking about students who are in an inclusion environment, making sure that you think about how you're presenting. You're not just doing this, you're not just giving verbal information, you're also providing visuals. Multiple means of representation is the presenting the multiple means of the way that you teach your kids. Some of them are going to need hands-on stuff to play around with. Really get in there. Sorry, my voice isn't very loud and there's no microphone. I'll try. Then there's also the multiple means of action and expression is how the student shows you what they've learned. So understanding that some kids might not be the writing pen on paper. They might need something that they can type. They might need picture symbols. They might use their communication device to show you what they know. There are different ways for them to do that, and that's fantastic, and that's all considered their way to show you what they know. Doesn't all have to be 5-paragraph essays. So these are some examples of the low-tech devices as I was talking about. The communication board, which I really need to get another picture of because I don't like that one. And then some of them are pencil grips. This really makes a big difference in some kids about their ability to hold a pencil. This is really a good fix for them. Being able to write on a slant board as opposed to all the way down may drastically increase the readability of what they're writing. And then some mid-tech devices. So some of you may be familiar with the Neo, which is just a portable keyboard. There are advantages to using portable keyboards over laptops because they don't get distracted by computer games or anything else. They can't play those games on Neos. It's really just for their written work. And with some kids, that's very important. And then the GoTalk 9 on the right side, the GoTalks also come in sizes 4, 9, 20, and 32. This is a nice kind of, let's see how the kids do with voice output. When you push one of those buttons, it speaks. Some kids react really well to that, some kids not so much. So it's another option for kids with limited communication. There's also the word prediction. There are different kinds of switches. Some of them speak, some of them control other things. And then also in terms of a mouse, some kids might have physical issues that don't allow that kind of motion that you need to control a mouse, but they can do a trackball. Trackballs are pretty easy. And then finally going to high tech, iPads, of course, everybody knows about iPads now. The one on the left is a Tobii communication device. It doesn't have the eye gaze module on it at the moment, but they do make eye gaze modules, which are cameras that pick up where the student's eye gaze is. So for kids who have really significant physical disabilities who aren't able to just reach out and touch something on a screen, they can use their eyes. And then the thing on the right is, as I said, I'm not a vision tech person, so I think this thing is really cool. It's a Braille note taker. So that is actually a keyboard. And the thing on the bottom, the parts on the bottom actually bring up the Braille, so you can feel the Braille, and it changes. It's the coolest thing to watch when kids are taking notes on it, because the bottom thing changes. I really like it. So some common misconceptions around AT that I wanted to just kind of put out there. AT is only computer equipment. I hear that a lot. AT is only for students with severe disabilities. AT is only for students with mild disabilities. It's only for tech-savvy people. We can't possibly do AT with this kid because we don't know how to turn on the computer. Then it always costs a lot of money, and you always need an evaluation. So actually, the purpose of AT in school is to provide access to the curriculum for students with disabilities. That is our overarching reason for assistive technology. A wide range of accommodations from low tech to high tech are considered assistive technology. That communication board, those pencil grips, those slant boards, those are considered to be assistive technology under the federal definition. They may not look assistive technology-ish, but that's what they're considered because they're an aid that helps them access the curriculum. AT does not always need to be provided by an AT specialist. A lot of the teachers and any good service provider incorporates AT into a lot of what they're doing with all of their students from the beginning, and that's really how it should be. That's part of the universal design for learning. Just because they haven't had an AT assessment does not mean that your child does not have access to assistive technology if necessary. And finally, the environment is a very big component about the AT assessment, which we'll get into in just a minute. So the big question when we go out to do assistive technology assessments is it possible that the student will not be able to make reasonable progress in the curriculum without assistive technology? So again, we're looking at, does your student need assistive technology in order to access the curriculum? So this is not exactly the same question of would they benefit from using technology? Potentially, but do they need it to access the curriculum? This is the difference when we do assistive technology assessments in schools, is that we are really looking very specifically at the need for the technology versus the use. The use of technology in the classroom is instructional technology, and that's fantastic. We are advocates for that as well. Assistive technology that goes into an IEP, very much associated with student needs this in order to access the curriculum. So I'm trying to fit everything into about 7 more minutes. So we can wait till the end, maybe.
Do you mind, just because your question may be similar to someone else's as well?
So in order to do the general framework about how we do assistive technology is that something called the Sett Framework. This stands for Student, Environment, Task, and Tools. So we're looking for, within taking the strengths of the student into consideration, what we can build on. We're looking at what the areas of the concerns are. And then we're looking at the environment. What kind of classroom is it? Is this a classroom that's very universal design for learning to begin with? The teacher incorporates lots of technology into it. Or is this a teacher who tends to rely more on the paper, pencil, traditional worksheet kind of format? So we need to consider the environment, and then we look at the tasks. What are the expectations for the student in the environment? What are the IEP goals? What are the curriculum? What's the general expectation of the student in their classroom environment? And then we consider the tools. What sort of tools are there? High tech, low tech, and everywhere in the middle that might help the student access the curriculum, so do what they need to do with the tasks within that environment. To help us out with this, there is something called the WADI, the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative, has a ton of really useful checklists that's all online, accessible for free. We use that quite frequently. There's also something that came out about a little over a year ago called the Protocol for Accommodations in Reading, which has been very helpful to tease out if the text-to-speech, the read out loud is really what's helping the student, or are there other strategies that would be more useful? And there are a handful of other kind of informal sorts of things. But the thing to take away from this is that there is no formal test. We can't say that they passed this test, they're eligible, or they failed this, they don't. That's not really the way that assistive technology evaluations work. It's almost, I don't love using the word evaluation to describe what we do, because it's not really, you don't get a pass or a fail when you're done. It's kind of you need to consider a lot of different factors. And this is, again, sort of the chart that we use. Sometimes we have gone through IEP meetings, and we will go through the chart as a team and think about all of this. And sometimes we just sort of talk it through without putting it on the chart. But this is always the backbone of an AT assessment within public schools. And I should give credit to Dr. Joy Zabala, who now works for CAST, who is the person who developed this assessment as part of her doctoral thesis a number of years ago. So the other thing I wanted to note is that we do AT consultations at times. The thing about doing evaluations through the IEP process is that there's very much a time limit. And if we want to do trials on different things, it's really difficult to get the trial and the evaluation and everything else we need to get done within the 45-day time frame. So sometimes doing it as a consultation with the current service providers and the current teacher is a better, more organic way of going forward. We have different ways for everyone to request it. As parents, if you have some concerns around assistive technology, the best route to go is to discuss it with the SESS at your school, what used to be called ETFs, but I think we've all sort of picked up on the new lingo now, SESS, or your child's teacher, or if they get related services like speech and OT, feel free to discuss it with them as well. And I think due to time constraints, I'm going to skip over the part on the difference between accommodations and modifications. We've discussed a lot of that already. The particularly important thing to note about this is that, as I keep sort of harping on, AT provides access to the curriculum. So it's documented in your IEP, either in the general comment section on the first page, or it will be in the accommodation section, which tends to be on page 2 or sometimes 3. And it doesn't really work like therapy. It's not designed for remediation. So it's not like speech therapy where you do the therapy and you expect there to be this particular outcome. Sometimes it's more of a, this is the accommodation. We're changing the way that the way that your student is responding to this. They may end up developing other skills through therapy that they no longer need that. They may develop, really good speech skills after a lot of articulation therapy, a lot of other stuff, in which case they don't necessarily need the accommodation anymore because they're able to do it for themselves. But it kind of goes hand in hand with therapy. But it doesn't necessarily cure things. Like, I don't want it to be set out as a cure-all, because it just allows for an accommodation to the curriculum. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So as I said, sometimes we go for trials. We'll discuss that at an IEP meeting. Trials generally take, I like the 30 to 45 days of a trial, depending on what it is. You get a really good sense of how the student is accessing this technology. Is this really helping them, or is it really just kind of another something else for them to do that's not as effective as we should like, and we need to reconsider the recommendation. So sometimes trials, if it's a consultation, the trial can happen kind of as an ongoing, and then once we decide what works, you can reconvene the team and go for an IEP amendment. If it's more of a, if the trial isn't effective, then we might reconvene the team and decide, okay, that didn't work, what's next? What are our other options? So that I just talked about. But one other thing to note is that when AT is written into an IEP, we prefer to describe it more generally. There are a couple of reasons for this. A lot of it has to do with the fact that companies go out of business. So while this particular brand might be the kind that we were using when we did the evaluation, if that breaks, we might not be able to replace it with that exact thing. It may end up being like if the GoTalk attainment company ever, heaven forbid, goes out of business. There are other options that do the same thing as GoTalks. We're going to replace it with that because we can't get anything from the attainment company anymore. And so that's the reasoning for describing things more generally rather than specifically stating stuff in the IEP. Once we also can't order anything until the IEP has been signed. So at least the acceptance of that part of it. The placement decisions and other things are another decision, but the actual, the IEP, the portion of the IEP that states the accommodations needs to be accepted and signed before we can then order anything. And as sort of a nice segue into other resources for AT, there is the Tech Goes Home program that is run, I don't exactly know how it connects to BPS, I'm a little hazy on that, but it is a program that various schools run after school, and on Saturdays, parents come in with their children and get trained on, it's usually laptops. It's more recently, they've been doing some with iPads as well, and then they get the training on that, and then they get to take it home. It's theirs. And then Easter Seals, which Cindy will talk about in more detail. And then also the other thing to note is that sometimes the insurance companies will pay for it, particularly for communication devices. Those eye gaze devices have a retail value of around $30,000. Insurance companies generally will cover that because it is considered a way, it's not just an educational issue, it's kind of a, you're not, you need to communicate in more places than just in school. So the insurance companies and Mass Health has, in our experience, been pretty good about covering communication devices and switches and that kinds of things. So those are other options for you to pursue, especially for taking this kind of stuff home. And so last final part, your first line when you have concerns about AT is probably your special ed coordinator at your school. Beyond that, we are, the Related Services office is located over at Boston Latin Academy, and my email and telephone number. I have to be honest, I am very rarely in the office, and it's hard to get a hold of me by phone. Email is a far better route. I am not great about getting, it might take me a day, I get a lot of emails, so it might take me a day or two to respond, but email is by far a better way than leaving me lots of messages that I don't get because I'm never in the office. So maybe like 2 minutes of question, 2 questions.
Well, what we wanted to do was actually have a panel discussion.
Okay.
And so let's, if we can, just, we'll let Easter Seals give its, now I guess abbreviated.
Can I say one thing first? So I ran a little bit. Tech Goes Home, I tried to sign up for that, and they wouldn't let me sign up because my daughter has a disability. They said I had to sign up as an alternative, and they didn't know where the alternative site would be.
So I know that Tech Goes Home does sometimes run, like there's one that's just starting up that's run by one of the teachers for the visually impaired. And so they do periodically run very specific trainings designed for families who have specific kinds of disabilities. I'm not all that familiar with I'm probably not your first person to ask about that, but.
The receptionist at the school told me if I had 12 other families with children with disabilities, that they would do a program. So,
Well, we can work on that logic and getting more information about, and then we can try to start to get the networking going on with that, okay? I don't want to be too long tonight, and I know people have questions, but let's let Easter Seals, who is a critical partner in this equation, give their basic, and now I guess abbreviated version, and then I think we can try to open up for other questions. So.